An introduction to British politics. Britain is a constitutional monarchy. Being a monarchy, that means they have a king or a queen instead of a president like republics have, and the monarch lives in Buckingham Palace. But it's a constitutional monarchy. That means that there's a constitution that limits the power of the monarch, even though that's not how it used to be. And this coat of arms of the British monarch, in fact, says in French, because they used to speak a French kind of language, the ruling class in England. It says Dieu et mon droit, means God and my right, kind of a relic from the time when the monarch did have a power from God, as it were. But not now, not today. The monarch is only a symbolic figurehead. So, more importantly, is this other palace, Palace of Westminster, that Britain is a parliamentary democracy. This palace holds Parliament, the Parliament of Britain. Currently, the monarch is Queen Elizabeth II, and as with any other monarchy in the world, the monarch is head of state. And by the way, she has been queen and head of state for quite some time. She's more than 90 years old now, and she became queen when she was 25. Anyway, in case you're wondering why isn't there a king, she is in fact married to this man. We call him Prince Philip. He's still alive. But the thing is, in Britain and many countries, you don't get to call yourself king if you've only married the queen. The title king would be reserved for people born to be king. Anyway, she is not just queen of Britain, but 16 countries, 15 other countries in addition to the United Kingdom, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and formerly she was queen of many more countries, including Pakistan and South Africa, Ceylon, that's Sri Lanka, Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Tanganyika, that's Tanzania. The Prime Minister is the one who is head of government. At the making of this video, it's David Cameron. And the Prime Minister lives in number 10 Downing Street, kind of the British equivalent of the White House. The government, look at this logo. It says HM, that stands for her, or in the case of a male monarch, his, Majesty's government, Her Majesty's government. That sort of signalizes that the government is in fact under the Queen, under the monarch, because that is the technical term, the technical way of putting it in a monarchy. But since the monarch is only a symbolic head of state, the Prime Minister, who is head of government, is not picked by the monarch at his or her whim, but instead the Majesty's government is responsible to Parliament. So the parliamentary majority decides who gets to form the government. Parliament, by the way, is bicameral. It's divided into two chambers. We call them upper and lower houses. In this case, in the case of the British Parliament, they are the House of Lords and the House of Commons. Quick thing to remember, the House of Commons is the one that is elected by the people. The House of Lords is not. They also have a Supreme Court, but only since 2009. Before that, it was the law lords, certain lords in the House of Lords who happened to be judges who got to function as a Supreme Court. I bet a lot of British people aren't that aware of the Supreme Court. It doesn't have the same kind of function that the Supreme Court does in the United States, for instance, where it's very important. Britain has no literal constitution, no written document that it calls its constitution, but it is still possible to talk about an unwritten constitution of Britain, sort of made through tradition, to realize, to understand how all of these institutions fit together. A little bit about the British democratic process here. There are two major parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, but there are also other ones like UKIP, the UK Independence Party, the Liberal Democrats, and the Scottish National Party. The House of Lords consists of about 780, see the number can vary, nobility appointed by the government. That's what a lord is, a nobleman. But you don't actually have to be a nobleman to be appointed. The government can actually make you one. The House of Commons, which is the democratic element here, consists of 650 members of parliament that are democratically elected by the people. The way this works is, to take the last general election of 2015, there are 650 parliament constituencies, which the country is divided into, and they elect one MP, member of parliament, each. And these are the stats for the votes cast. And we can tell 36 or 37% of the people in the entire election voted for a conservative candidate. Labour got 30%. The United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP, got 12.7%. But it's a first past the post system. It's not about how many votes you get countrywide, but who gets the most votes inside each parliament constituency. And so, therefore, these were the votes cast, but these were the MPs elected. And you can tell that these do not match completely. The Conservative Party got more than half of all the MPs, even though they only got 37% of the vote. While UKIP, they got almost 13% of the vote, but apparently received only one MP, member of parliament, because they got votes in many constituencies where they didn't get enough to win, and they only won in one constituency. So the House of Commons would look like this, with more than half being conservative, and therefore they have the majority. And since it's a parliamentary system, as leader of the Conservatives, David Cameron can thusly become Prime Minister and form a government, because he has the majority of Parliament, the House of Commons, supporting him. A little bit about other British and Commonwealth politics here. There's something called devolution, which was a process in the late 90s where powers were devolved, as they call it, from the central government of Britain to subnational governing institutions. This happened in 1999. What that basically means is Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland got some government institutions of their own. So the people of Scotland, they actually get to elect MPs, members of Parliament, for both the national British one in London and to their own one in Edinburgh, in Scotland. And as you can tell by this this chart of all of the MPs in the Scottish Parliament, the yellow one here is, of course, the Scottish National Party, which you remember. Wales have their own assembly, it's called. It's much smaller. They don't get to call it a parliament. They also have a government then, and Northern Ireland as well, an assembly and an executive, as they call it. Canada, just to mention that, has a parliament divided into a House of Commons and a Senate, and their political party system is dominated by three parties: a Liberal Party, a Conservative Party, and this other party called the New Democratic Party, which is to the left of the Liberal Party. So the Liberal is the center and Conservative center-right. Parliament of Australia is divided into a House of Representatives and a Senate, and their politics is dominated by two opposing parties, a Labour Party and the Liberal Party, which is their Conservative Party, I guess. And New Zealand Parliament consists only of a House of Representatives, while they also have kind of a two-party system between a Labour Party and their Conservative Party, which is called the National Party. Just a quick overview of British political history here, the whole thing. Before 1770, anyway, a Parliament of England, Scotland had their own parliament back then, came into being because of the Magna Carta of 1215, which seems like a constitutional document, but it's not the Constitution of Britain. Anyway, Parliament came into being, but it was unicameral, meaning only one chamber, the House of Lords, until 1341, because it was the Lords, the noblemen, who made the king sign this document so that they could have some more power and have a role in ruling the country. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 is very important for the history of democracy. This was, in fact, a war. Britain got a new monarch, and this monarch signed the Bill of Rights, which guaranteed the rights of Parliament and sort of the birth of parliamentary democracy, which would develop over the next few years. John Locke was the father of classical liberalism, a very important forerunner to the Enlightenment. But what that basically means is that he supported the rights of Parliament over the monarch. That's more democratic. And there was kind of a two-party system. Formal political parties did not yet exist, but they had these two factions in Parliament, the Whigs, which you can see eventually became the Liberal Party. So they're the Liberals that John Locke would have supported, and the Tories, which were, as you can tell by these key words here, monarchism and traditionalism, high church Anglicanism, divine right of kings, that these were the conservatives. The parliaments of England and Scotland were merged in 1707 because the kingdoms of England and Scotland were merged to form the Kingdom of Great Britain at that time. Parliamentary democracy developed in the 1700s, so this didn't happen immediately in 1689, but eventually Robert Walpole became the first parliamentary prime minister, the first prime minister who wasn't picked by the monarch's own whim, but because he had a support from the majority of the politicians in Parliament. And that's how parliamentary democracy works in any country in the world that has parliamentary democracy. Of course, presidential republics do not. Adam Smith, just to have mentioned him here, was the father of modern economics. He supported economic liberalism, free trade, and that was a position of the liberals. Edmund Burke became the father of modern conservatism because he sort of changed the landscape here, because he combined the Whigs' free trade with the Tories' social values. The reason for that was because he lived during the time of the French Revolution, and he noticed that many of his fellow Whigs, he was a Whig in fact, supported the revolution, but he hated the violence of it. He didn't want to be that radical, so he would much rather support the Tories' social values and support of monarchy, and because he much rather preferred the system they had in Britain. The Tories became the Conservative Party, and the Whigs became the Liberal Party. In the 19th century, they became formal political parties. I've included here pictures of a few famous prime ministers. A conservative prime minister, Benjamin Disraeli, the first and only ethnically Jewish, he was a Christian prime minister, and William Gladstone, a famous liberal prime minister. This period also saw a great expansion of suffrage. That means voting rights. Who gets to vote? Before this, very, very few people could vote. Obviously, no women, but very few men as well. And their suffrage was expanded gradually in the 19th century, and women's after 1918, I think. The Labour Party was founded in 1900 as a center-left social democratic / socialist, kind of means the same thing, party. And Labour became the second largest party, second only to the Conservative Party in 1918, and the largest one in 1945 when they got to form a government. But their first government was actually formed in 1924, but it didn't last very long. In 1945, Labour came to power, and they set about creating the welfare state. But the Conservatives, once they came to power afterwards in the 1950s, again with Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who was Prime Minister during World War II, they also supported the welfare state. I've included here NHS, the National Health Service, universal healthcare in Britain. And that was the post-war consensus that the Conservatives and Labour supported the welfare state and the same measures, whereas Margaret Thatcher, who became a Conservative Prime Minister from 1979, she was in favor of economic liberalization. That means taking all those government-owned businesses and privatizing them, and this was called New Right or Thatcherism. Tony Blair, who was a Labour Party leader and was Prime Minister, he moved Labour to the center. which was called New Labour, or Third Way, a third way between left and right, as it were. Keep in mind that center-left, center, and center-right, with Labour as the center-left, Conservatives as center-right, and Liberal Democrats as a smaller center party, which are actually the later incarnation of the Liberal Party from the 19th century. They are all moderate, while UKIP is sort of a more radical party here. It is far newer, founded in 1993, and it is considered a right-wing populist and Eurosceptic party who wants to do something as radical as having Britain leave the European Union, the EU. Anyway, thanks for watching, hoped you enjoyed it, and catch my other videos if you haven't already.